counteract every threat as long as we make sure, going back to the national security issue, as long as we make sure that our borders are secure, then do we have national security? Or as long as we make sure that all the internal threats are secure, do we have national security? Or as long as we make sure that all these other groups that are allowed to exist in the US but maybe threats to national security in terms of if they get too big, need to be monitored. So the goal performance, what do we determine as what is a proper threat level? What is a good threat level? Changes uncertainty. The same thing in division of labor. Who reports to whom to get to where in terms of national security. So one way to deal with uncertainty, of course, is to gather more information. The fix for information processing design is communication, coordination, create interdependencies, and of course to reduce uncertainty. The overall goal is to facilitate the decision-making process. Again, I just want to make sure that we are continuing to have, yes, we do. Sorry, I just have to make sure that we're still being recorded. Okay. Let's see, let's go back. Okay. So, those are the coordinating activities: hierarchy of goals, plans, spans of control, Slack resources. I think we're missing, okay. So, hierarchy of authority, we make sure we have plans of plans and goals. We make sure we have spans of control. We also make sure we have Slack resources. What are Slack resources? It talks about them on page 224. Slack resources are basically creating Slack in an organization. So how do you make sure that you don't starve to death after not eating for a day? Well, you make sure you have some fat reserves, right? The same thing in organizations. How do you make sure that if everyone is working on different issues, if a new issue comes in, the organization still has the ability to respond to a new issue? Well, you always have a couple of employees or a couple of departments that are being made to work maybe at 80% of their capacity or 60% of their capacity, where they can take in more work. Or you keep more employees in a certain organization just so that they have something what we call slack, so extra, if you will. Okay, Slack resources is create a situation in which they have extra resources. Or some organizations have a rainy day fund. Some states, California has a rainy day fund. We have a rainy day fund because in case we have more forest fires, which we will because of global warming, or in case our oceans decide to kill us, which they will because of global warming, we have money to address those kinds of issues. And environmental management, scanning the environment, not the environment as in the sun and the sky and the rain, but scanning the environment outside us, the external stakeholders that are related to us, to make sure that in some way we are able to either address them, or if they are far enough away, we have some level of resources. We are designed in such a way that as those stakeholder issues become more pertinent, more salient, we're able to figure them out. Self-contained tasks. So this was what I talked about when I talked about if an organization wants to reduce uncertainty, they create these manuals, self-contained tasks, this entire manual of how to get your work done, just so that you don't have to go to an outsider, you don't have to go to your boss, you don't have to go to your subordinate, you know exactly what the way things are done. Vertical information systems and lateral relations and e-coordination all talk about the same thing. Creating systems of communication between yourself and your superior, yourself and your subordinate, yourself and your peers, right? Being able to email everyone or email important people just so that you can get the kind of information you need, e-coordination, and the idea of reconfiguration. So you're working 40 hours on something, you now have to take a break, but there's someone else who can jump in for you, or you can reconfigure the organization in such a way that everyone is able to work on different aspects. So you train everyone in different levels of the organization. You see a lot of reconfiguration. If you ever go to Costco, you'll see the same person one day doing checkout, you'll see the same person one day making sure that there's enough, that everyone's bought the right activities. You'll see the same person selling at the sales floor. That's reconfiguration, changing people around because there's enough training whereby you can give them different jobs. And then finally, of course, the issue of virtual corporations, whereby an organization contracts all activities except for those at which it is superior. So the idea that, let's say, the city of Turlock makes sure that its garbage is done by a private organization. The city of Turlock makes sure that maybe its parks are run by a private cleaning service, makes sure that its rest areas are run by a private cleaning service. This idea that we can contract out as an organization those aspects that we are not really good at, but we know other people have expertise in. So we are still virtually doing those, but doing those because we've privatized them. Mintzberg synthesized organizational design, so he looked at design in a different way as well, into 5 forms, ideal forms, or configurations that do not exist in the real world, but do provide consultants and managers with a framework. So he looked at 6 components, and his 5 organizations were, well, let's look at the 6 components first, and then we'll talk about the different 5 organizations. The 6 components that he talked about, or each configuration of each design had to have an operating core, a strategic apex, a middle line, a technostructure, a support staff, and an ideology. The operating core, of course, was what we go back to when we talked about the issue of virtual corporations, that you had to have some people who were incredibly good at their core issue. So people directly related to the service or product production. So Apple's operating core are those designers that are intimately aware of the kind of design that Apple does. Everything else that Apple does, which is, create, what do you call it, or Apple Watches, or create all these extra things that Apple does, or just for Apple to run, not only does it have to have a bunch of programmers, but it also has to be able to reach out to the community, be able to satisfy the external stakeholders, talk about Apple in an environmentally friendly way, issues of human resources, issues of maybe the rights of other of the individuals in the organization. All that can be contracted out, but the one thing that cannot be contracted out is the operating core, these chief designers and programmers that understand what Apple really does. The strategic apex. The strategic apex serves the needs of the people who control the organization. So these are key administrators who understand how it is to make sure that the operating core is fulfilled in the best way possible. Middle line managers are managers who connect the strategic apex with the operating core. So the strategic apex, of course, are the CEOs, the CFOs, those kinds of people, and then the middle line managers are managers who connect the CFO or CEOs with the operating core. Technostructure are the analysts who design, plan, and train the operating core. Support staff are specialists who provide support to the organization, and ideology are the traditions and beliefs that make the organization unique. These components by Mintzberg are linked by 4 flows: the level of authority, the work material, the information, and the decision processes. It's hard to explain as much over the course of an online lecture, so we'll talk about this in class, but I want to make sure that you guys go through this so the next time we meet, you are able to examine these 2 aspects. And the organization structure depends on the organization, its members, the distribution of power, the environment, and the technical system.